and welcome to Daily Debrief brought to you by People's Dispatch. I'm Pragya. Today on our show, we have Ecuador rejecting a conservative-promoted referendum and marking a progressive comeback in local elections. Next up, a raucous reception to United States President Joe Biden's State of the Union address. And Lebron James passes Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he's NBA's all-time leading point scorer now. On Sunday, Ecuador rejected conservative President Guillermo Lasso's constitutional referendum. They voted no on 5 February to 8 questions about security, institutions, democracy and the environment. It's no big surprise as Lasso has been in a tight spot. His popularity hovers at 30%. On the same day, leftist citizen revolution movement made gains in local elections held in Ecuador. Zoe from People's Dispatch joins us with the update. Zoe, thank you very much for joining us. Looks like you're out somewhere, but we're just going to take a few minutes of your time to discuss Ecuador. Shall we begin with the constitutional referendum, which seems to be something which people have just outright rejected? Give us a background, give us what it means.
Well, this is a very important vote that happened this past weekend in Ecuador, especially given the fact that over the past couple of years, progressive forces have had some major losses in the country, specifically talking about the elections that happened in 2021 when Andrés Arauz, who was the progressive candidate, lost against conservative Guillermo Lasso. This was seen as a huge setback for progressive forces. And so with the defeat of Lasso's referendum, it's seen as kind of a boost to the anti-conservative, anti-neoliberal movement in the country, which has been rebuilding itself over the past several years since this defeat. And that really showed that they were able to mobilize, they were able to inform people about what this referendum meant, what the constitutional amendment would mean for the people, and they were able to defeat it. So this is seen as a huge advance in a moment where they're rebuilding, they're trying to reach the people, trying to innovate their strategies, and it's clearly worked.
Right. And also the local body elections. Now, those show that Guillermo Lasso will not be happy at all with those results.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There were prefecture elections as well as mayoral office elections. And there was a huge amount of these offices, local level offices, that actually went to candidates of the Citizens' Revolution, which many people said was dead in the grave with the prescription and the lawfare campaign against Rafael Correa and many other members of his former government. The right wing has really been trying to squash out this movement. And with Andrés Arauz's defeat, once again, they said, okay, we've done it. And really these local victories, for example, the mayoral office of Quito, of Guayaquil, and of other major cities is a clear sign that actually they are rebuilding forces. And once again, they're here to stay, and that the Ecuadorian people actually want progressive policies. They don't want a banker as president, which is Guillermo Lasso, he's a banker. And they don't want these neoliberal policies that mean an increase in fuel costs, an increase in food prices, and a return to the misery of the 90s.
So it wasn't exactly easy times for people for the last few years. The rightward shift actually created a lot of real pain for people. Can you just describe what that was like?
Definitely. So Rafael Correa left office in end of 2016 to 2017. He was taken over by Lenin Moreno, who had been his vice president, yet when he was in office, he made a complete rightward shift. Many believe that this was an agreement made with the United States. On one hand, he ejected Julian Assange from the Ecuadorian embassy in London. He made several agreements with Ecuador, with the United States, for example, opening up the possibility of the U.S. using their military bases. And on top of this, they made agreements with the IMF, imposed massive austerity measures, which saw real increases in people's daily costs. And this, of course, was made much, much worse during the pandemic. Ecuador was one of the most hard-hit countries during the pandemic. The public health system completely collapsed in the city of Guayaquil. There were images all over international and national TV of how just these neoliberal austerity measures were affecting the ability for people to get access to health services. Even funeral services were severely limited. And people expected that because of all this hardship that happened, and of course also because of the uprising that happened in 2019 against these austerity measures, that the 2021 presidential elections would see a shift towards progressive government again. That didn't happen, but now, as I said, with these local elections, it shows that this tide is growing back. it's coming at a time where progressive governments are rising across the continent. So I think we're seeing progress for these forces in Ecuador, but it's definitely a wait and see moment. Rafael Correa, for example, is still not able to return to the country. He was, of course, president of Ecuador for several years, and he has many, many different corruption cases against him, which have been highly questioned by legal experts in the country and internationally. So there's definitely a long way to go, but progressives are definitely making a comeback.
Right, Zoe, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
The State of the Union address is a key ritual in United States politics. It's a moment where the US President delivers an address to the Congress on the government's performance and plans. Did Joe Biden's address on Tuesday meet expectations? What signals does it send as his term hits halfway mark? Natalia from People's Dispatch joins us to discuss the key points. Natalia, thanks very much for joining us. So the State of the Union address is supposed to give the government's plan for the year ahead. What are the key takeaways from Biden's address?
Yeah, so Biden has been president for the past 2 years. So, his State of the Union focused a lot on what he has already done, not, necessarily what he can and will change. He spent a lot of time talking about how he created a lot of jobs, how people's economic conditions have improved, how working class people, how he has so many different plans for working class people, and he's already implemented a lot of changes that help people without college degrees, how he's prevented, passed laws preventing price gouging from corporations on pharmaceuticals, a lot of different things that he's already done. A lot of things that people are taking issue with, however, is that he made a lot of campaign promises that he didn't end up doing for various different reasons. And, compared to the lofty campaign promises, a multi-trillion-dollar Build Back Better social spending package that did not pass, student loan forgiveness that did not pass, $15 minimum wage that did not happen, abortion rights taken away, all these different things that he, promised to protect or promised to implement that didn't end up happening. Any sort of legislation that would have helped end police brutality, even the very mild George Floyd Justice and Policing Act did not end up passing during his presidency as of yet. And it doesn't seem like with a Republican-controlled Congress that will happen anytime soon. And so, a lot of people are saying that, he really is trying to distract from the fact that he, during his speech, he said that he ran on a platform of fundamental change, but he did not fundamentally change things. In fact, during his campaign, he himself promised wealthy donors that nothing would fundamentally change and that people's living conditions would not really change. And so, it seems like he is following that line in the sense that a lot of his campaign promises have fallen through.
Right, Natalia. And it's the midway mark for his presidency, right? So does the speech he gave actually signal that what the government's intent will be? Will this be a part of what his campaign will look like? And also, what were the reactions like? I understand there were a lot of interruptions, etc. What does that mean?
For the interruptions, this is something that does tend to happen during the State of the Union speeches. The opposing party will heckle. The Republicans particularly like to heckle. You heard a lot of, I think a notable instance was when he was talking about immigration, and he talked about how he prevented fentanyl from entering the country, other things, and Republicans were shouting at him to talk about the border, especially very right-wing Republicans who want to, quote unquote, secure the border against immigrants, quite frankly, people who are coming from Latin America due to various different reasons. And conservatives are very against this. They're very racist towards these immigrants, and they want money to go into securing the border in that mind, meaning like driving out, brutalizing immigrants that are coming in. Biden is by no means a pro-immigrant president. There's still these ICE detention centers that violate the human rights of these immigrants coming in, but he's not as right-wing as the Republicans on this issue. So they were heckling him about that. And I think that to some extent, like the heckling, it's a spectacle for sure. But it doesn't really reflect how most people in the US feel about these issues. And a lot of most people in the US are very against a lot of Republican conservative platforms. And that's not in no way like a reflection of necessarily how the people feel, right? Like most people are for student loan forgiveness. Most Republicans are against that. Most people are for abortion rights. Most Republicans are against that. So the heckling doesn't necessarily, it's a little bit of a political theater. I think, Biden supporters, I think that they would continue to support him, but Biden is not a popular president by any means. The majority of people are not favorable to him at this moment, according to polling. And I think that, whether people in the US lean conservative or lean more left, their economic conditions, again, did not fundamentally change. The cost of living jumped, and while wages remained, wages have not kept up with inflation and the cost of living. A lot of people in the US are food insecure, 34 million. People can't, a lot of people feel like they can't, like they're one emergency away from poverty. The Poor People's Campaign estimates that 150 million or half the US population pretty much is poor or low income. So, people are in very dire straits right now with inflation, with the COVID-19 pandemic that is still raging, with rents skyrocketing. Most people are not in a comfortable position right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was some frustration at Biden for not necessarily speaking to any of those economic conditions at all, not speaking to the reality of most people in the US, which is poverty and insecurity, and instead touting what many may say or may argue are minor changes in the economic order.
Right, Natalia. Thanks a lot for joining us with that update.
Thanks for having me.
Lebron James may yet play with son Bronny in a couple of years, but he reached the pinnacle of his sport on Wednesday. He's become the NBA's highest point scorer, overtaking Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's 38,387 points. He joins a top-scoring list that has Karl Malone, Kobe Bryant, and Michael Jordan. Siddhant Ani joins us with the updates. Siddhant, thanks for joining us. So, LeBron James making news after a rather long time and breaking a record that's been held for very long. What have been the reactions, responses? Talk to us about it.
I guess kind of we knew that it might happen at any point because going into the game, he was 36 points short of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's, like you mentioned, long-standing record, which is held since 1984, was when he kind of hit this mark of 38,387 points in regular season NBA games. And so the NBA expected it. The broadcaster and all of that put out the information that, depending on the scenario, we won't stop the game to mark this record. Because if it's a competitive game, if there's only a 6-point difference or 1 minute left to play, then we won't take a pause to kind of mark the breaking of the record. But it's been something that's been in the making for a while. Pragya, LeBron James, known as King James in the basketball world, now goes to the top of the list that includes not only Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but the likes of Karl Malone, of course, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, all these guys. So as far as men's basketball is concerned, I think LeBron establishing himself as one of the best ever. Going back a little bit to when he was just a kid, still a teenager, I think he was in his junior year in high school, which is in American terms, the year before you kind of finish your high schooling. And he became the first kind of kid in that age group to make it to the cover of Sports Illustrated magazine. So kind of identified as someone who was destined for greatness in basketball. And of course, he could have played two sports, by the way. He could have also had a career in the NFL, which is American Football League by some standards. And it's only in a sport like basketball or the NFL to some extent that a guy who's 6'9" and about 115 kilos can be playing in a position called small forward. You wonder what the big guys are like. But yeah, so from then on, he made the jump straight from high school into the NBA, not going the college route as many do, even though he had scholarships from several Division I schools in the US. And in his first year with the Cleveland Cavaliers, he was picked as the first pick in the 2003 draft. He won the Rookie of the season in his first year in the league. And then going on to establish very strong relationships with the fan communities in all of the places that he's been to, whether it's been Cleveland, Miami, or Los Angeles after that. And overall, the great part of it, Pragya, is that he's always been considered a pass-first kind of guy who's also demonstrated really good leadership skills on court and things like that. So not necessarily himself known as a standout scoring guy. You know what I mean? Okay. All these other guys, whether it's Jordan or Kareem with his hook, they all had certain signature shots. Karl Malone playing on the inside as the big man. LeBron had none of that. And yet he seems to just be good at everything, including a bunch of the stuff that he does off court. It's increasingly difficult to find a male athlete who has spent this much time, made so much money, and has a relatively untainted, unblemished record in his life outside of the basketball court. So that's another big positive. And for that reason, I think most of his peers consider him one of the faces of the league at present.
Siddhant, is he likely to continue playing? What's going to happen next?
So his kid, his son, known as Bronny James, will be eligible for the NBA draft in 2024. And LeBron has kind of made a few statements saying that he wants to continue playing till he gets a chance to play alongside his son.
Or against.
Or against. Although given his kind of influence in probably the transfer market as well as the draft, given the position he holds in his team, against is unlikely. It's most likely that wherever he is at that point when Bronny does come into the draft, he will be selected by the team where LeBron is. So that'll be a great little moment, I guess, for them as a family, and of course for fans in general. So yeah, he's likely to continue for some time to come. I would say a couple of years at least, which means that 40,000 point mark is quite likely to be a possibility. And physically speaking, I mean, of course, basketball is a hard sport. That it's a high impact sport. It's a contact sport to some extent, even though the rules have now been changed quite a bit. So it does take a toll on the body. But these guys spend a lot of time and effort maintaining that part of themselves. And so no indications to say that he's anywhere close to retiring Pragya at this point. And the league definitely will also kind of want to build up this narrative of, the next generation coming in and taking over the mantle, particularly if it can happen in a way when the two are on court together. So from a business perspective, commercial perspective, narrative perspective, it just makes sense for him to continue a little bit longer and further cement, I guess, the place that he's already built for himself in men's basketball.
Okay, Siddhant, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Anytime.
And that's all we have for today. Thank you for watching Daily Debrief. Do come back to us tomorrow. You can visit our website for more People's Dispatch stories and watch our regular updates on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.